On today's episode of Disqualified, we ask the question, what happens when a driver desperate to finally make it to F1 brings together a junior Formula team and a sports car team to make his dream come true? You get EuroBrun Racing, one of the worst teams in F1 history. Before we get into that, though, this is Disqualified. I'm your host, Matthew, and I'm joined here by two 24 Hours Le Mans iRacing winners, Davey Hazard and Tommy Bordeaux.
Yep, I have the official watch. You saw me on TV win the race. That was me. I was in the Porsche that didn't wreck at the end. I'm Davey Hazard. Nice to meet you.
To be fair, it was Daytona, not Le Mans.
Oh, did I say Le Mans?
Yeah.
Dude, I didn't even catch it.
It's fitting for this show, so.
Maybe
the Porsche wrecked at Le Mans, so you know.
Maybe we'll get that together for 1 year. But hi, Tommy Bordeaux, co-driver of the team that won the thing.
For reference, we won our iRacing 24-hour race. It was a lot of fun.
Kind of a big deal. Davey streamed
the
whole
biggest
thing.
of deals. 25 hours of stream. Don't watch
time.
it. It sucks.
Yep. By the way, first episode of Disqualified did really well. We were really happy with the response we got from that, and hopefully this is a project that we get to keep doing, and hopefully it just keeps going up from here, because this has been a lot of fun, and we've all been looking forward to doing the next episode. So, this week,
everyone that viewed it as well.
Oh yeah,
from over here.
Yep. This week we will be talking about another late 80s backmarker team, also with some junior Formula pedigree, called EuroBrun. Like the previous episode, the late 80s were a period of great optimism for many teams in Formula One. The impending ban of turbo engines was looming, and as such, the grid swelled with team after team looking at the new rules with bright-eyed enthusiasm. One of these people was Argentinian driver Oscar Larrari. Larrari had been the protege of none other than F1 legend Juan Manuel Fangio, who had scouted him from his native Buenos Aires when he was a teenager. Oscar got a late start in racing, beginning his karting career at 19, but he managed to win the Santa Fe Regional Championships in 76, 77, and 1979 before moving to Europe to run European F3 in 1980.
Davey, 19. We're already ahead of the curve.
That's what I'm saying.
We're on our way to a backmarker Formula One team.
Matt, the goal is to have an episode about our own team.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. I'm all in on
that. 2 solid years in 1980 and 1981 saw Oscar catch the eyes of Gianpaolo Pavanello. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Italian names are difficult for Americans like me. He owned a little team called Euro Racing. Euro Racing had taken over the operations of Alfa Romeo's struggling factory F1 team that same year. So the team's F3 Challenger, its home-built F101 chassis, got factory Alfa engines to go with it. Euro Racing had been a fixture in F3 for a while, but this was a big deal that kind of put him over the top. Oscar used this to great effect. He won 7 races, scored 4 more podiums, and a commanding championship win over teammate Emmanuel Pirro. This season scored Larrari 2 opportunities with a full season in Minardi's F2 car, as well as a Ferrari test. This is obviously before Minardi makes the eventual jump up to F1. Oh, God, I almost forgot that part. This is where Juan Manuel Fangio comes back into the story kind of importantly, as he was the one pulling the strings, because he was very connected with F1, as he was kind of, royalty on the paddock. However, neither of these would be beneficial to Oscar's career, as his F2 season was a disaster. He scored a 7th place at the opener in Silverstone, but that would be the highlight, as he retired in Thruxton, DNS'd in Hockenheim, and didn't appear again in the car until the finale Mugello, where he retired as well. His Ferrari test didn't lead anywhere either, and Larrari found himself in a tough spot. With his open wheel career seemingly on hold, he found himself in the World Endurance Championship with Scuderia Savama Motor, driving their Lancia LC1. Some modest results in his 3 starts with the team saw him earn a full-time opportunity with one of the great privateers in sports car racing, and one of the other important figures in the story, Brun Motorsport.
Okay.
So, throughout the 80s, the World Endurance Championship and Group C sports cars were hugely popular. By the end of the decade, they were rivaling F1 in popularity. That's where Michael Schumacher got his start. That's where Sauber came from. So it was still kind of seen as a potential pipeline to F1. So one of the main privateer teams, like I mentioned, was owned by Walter Brunn. Brunn was a sports car driver in his own right before he entered the realm of driver/owner when he took over the struggling GS Sport team in 1983. GS Sport was a partner with Sauber and their early sports car efforts. So Brunn took their car, modified it to become the Saycar C6, I believe is how it's pronounced. But unfortunately, the team struggled with the redesigned car, so the newly renamed Brunn Motorsport became one of the first privateer owners of the Porsche 956. Porsche's Group C program throughout the World Endurance Championship of the 80s was like hugely dominant, and to become one of their first privateers is kind of like a high honor. They regularly ran inside the top 10, usually in the range of 4th to 7th, even scoring occasional podiums in a series that was dominated by manufacturers. 86 saw them replace their 956s with the legendary 962, 962C, one of the most dominant cars ever built. And with it, Larari scored a win at Jerez en route to 6th in the standings. Next year in 87, he scored a further 4 podiums and finished 7th as well, showing that he and Walter Brunn knew how to take the fight to the big name teams. His stock as a driver was high again, but he had a problem. Oscar was 33 years old, and his F1 dream was getting more and more unlikely, because 33 is when most guys are usually wrapping up their career. So, much like his mentor Juan Manuel Fangio had done to get him his shot with Ferrari, Oscar Larari started pulling some strings with his connections to make his own shot at F1.
I like where this is going.
I'm intrigued to see where this goes because he still seems pretty far away from F1. Like realistically, in my head, there's still many hoops to go through, and I think the fact that there's so many hoops to go through, and that this is probably going to happen soon, is very telling of how it's going to go. But
yeah, it's a little concerning that Oscar hasn't run F3000 really outside of that like partial season.
Yeah.
Group C prototypes are, I mean, it's a top level racing series at the time, but it's this whole different kind of thing. So, but luckily,
you know what, man, I say go for it. I don't care. It's his dream. Yeah. You know, time's ticking, man. You gotta go.
If you can't catch the eyes of an existing team owner, why not bring some people together to make a team for you? So, Euro Racing and Brunn Motorsport had been very successful in both of their series, with Euro Racing continuing to be a force in F3 after Oscar left. Euro Racing also had their experience running Alfa Romeo's F1 effort and even building their ladder chassis, the 183T, 184T, and 185T. So on paper, you'd think this is a good, kind of pipeline to have. But if you know anything about F1, the 185T was described by 17-year veteran Riccardo Patrese as, quote, the worst car I ever drove. It was so bad that it was eventually abandoned for return to the previous year's 184T.
Yikes.
And at the end of the year...
Familiar.
Yeah. And at the end of the year, Alfa Romeo pulled out of F1 and they wouldn't be seen again until, 2019 when they came back? So
that is awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
So despite this, Larari brought Euro Racing and Walter Brunn together to create a joint Formula One team for 1988 called EuroBrun.
Hold on, just real quick.
Yes.
What a name.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a name. We're glossing over the name. I don't know if I love it or if I hate it.
It's one of those ones that I've read it so many times that it just sounds natural to me, so I wish I could hear it again for the first time and be like, what?
EuroBrun. EuroBrun. When I hear it, the words mean nothing to me. None of the letters in there create anything that makes any sense.
It's just syllables.
Oh, I love it. Okay. We're good. Had to say that.
Where was I? With the partnership in place, EuroBrun brought back the designer of those Alfa Romeo cars, Mario Tolentino, to pen the team's new car, the ER188. It bore a striking resemblance to the 185T. The car featured the obligatory Ford Cosworth DFZ engine that you'll see most of the time in this era.
Oh, man, that reminds me real quick. Yeah, Matthew, I remember you mentioning that last episode. Yeah, I went to some old results and all the bottom
Yeah.
teams forward. It's incredible.
You might see some
I love
Judd
that.
sprinkled in there too,
Yeah.
but it's like almost all Cosworths.
Some Judd.
Painted plain white except for the pretty cool red rims. I'm not gonna lie, it's a nice little touch on it. The car had sponsorship from Tomasini, a conveyor belt company, and minor sponsorship from Marlboro. That sponsorship came from EuroBrun's second driver, Italian driver Stefano Modena. This was a huge get at the time, as Modena had just made a previous start for Brabham, as well as being the reigning F3000 champion. You'll notice that through a lot of this era of F1, is Marlboro seemingly sponsored almost every single Italian driver in Formula One. Like, you would be hard-pressed to find a backmarker car that didn't have Marlboro logos on it somewhere. Coloni almost had them, so...
Sheesh.
They could have changed the game
Yeah.
for Scuderia Colony, the United States' favorite F1 team.
Yeah. Everything on paper looked promising, with two successful drivers and a partnership between two teams who had been highly competent in their respective series. With the F1 grid swelling to 31 cars with the entrances of Real, BMS Scuderia Italia, and the aforementioned Coloni, EuroBrun's 2 cars would join the 5-car pre-qualifying lottery each week.
We're back to this story. We're back
Yeah.
to the storyline, the pre-qualifying storyline.
You thought we were done with pre-qualifying.
Well, we're just starting.
However, pre-qualifying would not be an issue for EuroBrun for the first half of the season, as both cars comfortably pre-qualified 2nd and 3rd in the season opener in Brazil and made the grid 24th and 26th. Unfortunately, Larari was out on lap 1 with an electrical issue, while Modena packed it up 20 laps later with an engine issue. San Marino saw Modena edge Larari for the final grid spot by 0.3 seconds, where he reached the finish, although 8 laps down, not classified in 19th. Monaco saw Larari made the grid in 18th, though he retired 14 laps in after a brake issue led to a crash. Modena was excluded from pre-qualifying as his team carelessly missed a weight check, and he was basically disqualified.
Disqualified, eh?
Yeah, hey, it's the name of the show. The following
They
week in
knew.
Mexico... Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I just said they knew that they were going to be on the show.
The following week in Mexico would see Larari make the grid while Modena was excluded again, this time for the rear wing being mounted too high. Larari would snag the last grid spot in 26th and make the finish of the race 4 laps down in 13th, just ahead of former star of the show, Gabriele Tarquini in the Cloney. Canada saw both cars make the grid, Larari down in 24th, while Modena qualified a stellar 15th. Modena finished a fine 12th as well, just 3 laps off of Ayrton Senna, while Larari crashed after a collision with Rene Arnoux. Detroit saw both cars again make the grid, Modena 19th, Larari 23rd. In the race, however, Larari retired 26 laps in with a gearbox issue, while Modena wrecked heavily, breaking a concrete barrier and giving himself a whiplash on a difficult street circuit.
God.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, there's still some good success there so far. Things aren't looking too bad.
Yeah, they're actually like running decently well. Like
Yeah.
they haven't failed to pre-qualify a single time. So
I can't wait till we get to a team that is just disaster from the start. This isn't awful.
But that's
It's
also,
much
we thought
worse.
about Coloni to start with. And
yeah,
so,
yeah, I do
you
remember
know,
having this exact
That's what I'm saying.
conversation.
That's what I'm saying.
We were like, hey, they're doing all right. This can't go wrong.
no.
It's not like this is a show about failed F1 teams. The team recovered in France. Paul Ricard as Modena qualified 20th, and Larari took the final grid spot again in 26th. Larari again retired with gearbox issue 64 laps in, while Modena took another solid finish 14th, 3 laps down. The British Grand Prix at Silverstone saw Larari fail to qualify, missing the grid by half a second, while Modena made the grid 20th and again reached the finish line 12th, just a lap down.
Ooh,
It's not bad.
While
spicy. There's no way this can go wrong.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
This is a solid foundation to base your team off of right here.
While reliability was still an issue, things on the surface seemed to be going well at the halfway point in the season. However, it wasn't all great within the confines of the team. A lack of sponsorship meant a lack of funds, which meant a lack of development on the car. Brun and Euro Racing weren't seeing eye to eye as well, as Euro Racing seemed very uninterested in running F1 and was allegedly looking for a way out of the partnership. To top this off, the driver who brought them together, Oscar Larari, had been soundly outperformed by Stefano Modena, and the team was looking to replace him. Brun wanted Larari to focus on their sports car team and former Zach Speed driver Christian Danner was allegedly signed to a contract for the rest of the year, but when he was getting fitted for the car, he found out he physically couldn't fit in the ER 188 chassis. So Larari was retained for the rest of the season.
Sheesh.
Was he
That's
a
gotta
portly
be-
man, or was he just tall?
I think he was just a taller guy.
Okay, I was very confused.
Yeah.
I was like,
Because that was the
fit.
thing with Nigel Mansell when he came back with McLaren in '95. He couldn't fit because Nigel's got real big arms and he likes to drive with his arms up like this.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm hitting my elbows on the side of the chassis and I can't physically fit in this car. So he missed like the first 2 races of the year while they were building him a new chassis.
God,
that he
that's
could fit in.
insane. Jeez.
It's not unprecedented. That, and if you look up when Justin Wilson drove for Minardi, his like whole head and shoulders is sticking out of the car because he was just so tall.
those photos are insane. They actually like look dangerous. It's
Yeah.
insane.
So, the German Grand Prix saw both EuroBruns make the grid again, Modena 25th and Larari 26th. Though for the first time all season, Larari was the one making the finish in 16th, 2 laps down, while Modena retired with engine issues just 15 laps in. While the team was slipping down the qualifying order, wow, I read that wrong. The team was slipping down the qualifying order as Modena edged Larari for the final grid slot in Hungary. The Italian took EuroBrun's best ever finish, coming home 11th, 4 laps down. However, the team's lack of development was finally starting to catch up to them as the 2 cars were slowest in pre-qualifying, meaning Larari failed to pre-qualify for the first time. Modena then failed to qualify, only setting the 29th fastest lap. This would be the story in Italy and Portugal as well. Larari failed to pre-qualify and Modena failed to qualify in both rounds before both cars made it through pre-qualifying. Modena would again qualify on the final starting spot, leaving Larari 28th, over a second slower than his teammate. Modena again brought the car home 13th, 2 laps down, but this would be their final race finish of the season. Japan saw new sponsorship from M505 as well as Train. 2 weeks in a row that's happened. Japan saw a new sponsorship from M505 as well as a new yellow and white livery, and both cars made it through pre-qualifying only to miss the grid in 28th and 30th. Both cars over 7 seconds off pole time. For the season finale in Australia, both cars made it through pre-qualifying and made the grid. Modena 20th, Larari 25th, but neither car made the finish. Both suffered half-shaft failures, Larari out 12 laps in and Modena 63 laps in. This was a minor bright spot at the end of a promising season that had tailed off badly, but unfortunately this would be the last time 2 EuroBruns would make the grid in an F1 race.
Of course.
Already.
There it is.
Already
End of season
there.
1.
We're already there. It
So,
cannot take long for us to get to this point, and we're
No.
here. We're in it. Oh my god.
EuroBrun ended the year having started off strong, but much like their pre-qualifying brethren, Coloni ended in shambles. While Modena regularly put in strong performances, Larari had been thoroughly outshone in the team he helped form. EuroBrun ended the season with 3 failures to pre-qualify, 9 DNQs, and 10 DNFs to only 8 finishes, and 17th out of 18 teams on countback, being one of 8 teams to not score points. That's the really interesting thing about 88 is EuroBrun made the grid a lot more than the other teams, but their finishes were just bad. Like Coloni scored an 8th, even though they failed to qualify for the vast majority of the season.
Yeah.
Modena.
A lot.
Oh, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just. Wow.
Yeah.
They were bad. They were bad.
They were one of the 8 teams to not score points. Modena ended the season 29th on countback, Larari 32nd out of 36, the second lowest driver to attempt every race.
Not the lowest.
Yeah, not last.
I mean, that's something.
It's something, yeah. It was a shocking wake-up call to a team and a set of drivers who had been spoiled with success so far, and Larari's attempt at F1 unfortunately wouldn't draw the attention of any other teams. So
This has gone downhill fast.
Yeah. It just like out of nowhere, like it's literally they're qualifying every week and like finishing like 12th or 13th every week, and then it's just like a hard cutoff. You're dead last. You're not making the grid anymore. So, after the frustrating end to a promising start to their debut season, change was on the horizon for EuroBrun. Euro Racing was almost entirely uninvolved despite the team being run out of their headquarters. with Walter Brun taking over operations of the team. Brun was attempting to find other partners to replace Euro Racing, which included attempted mergers with the struggling Lotus team, before Brun outright purchased ownership of the Brabham team. Brabham had just missed the entirety of 1988, having not been able to find a new engine deal after ending their association with longtime partner BMW. Seeing as the team was not in much better shape than EuroBrun, Walter sold the team to fellow Swiss businessman Joachim Lüthi. Because of this relationship, though, EuroBrun was able to get their hands on a supply of Judd V8 engines, a company formerly owned by Brabham. The ER188 was updated to accept the new engines, as well as Pirelli tires. Now named the ER188B, the only major sponsorship came from JSK. The car was intended to be a stopgap, as Brun then set up a design firm in Basingstoke, the UK, called Brun Technics, run by George Wrighton. Wrighton had worked for Haas Lola's previous F1 entry in the early 80s, as well as helping design Reynard's F3000 chassis of the era, and then later working under John Barnard, Ferrari's technical director. So, had a little bit of F1 pedigree, or racing pedigree.
Yeah, they were building a resume. They were building a little resume for themselves. I guess, I see it.
Larari then returned to Brun's sports cars team, while Stefano Modena would actually move to the rebooted Brabham team that came back in 1989. And their new driver would be the young Swiss driver Gregor Wojtek, as he would drive the lone EuroBrun for 1989. Wojtek was undoubtedly talented, but very erratic. During his F3000 season the year before, he won the second round at Vallelunga before DNQing the very next race. But most infamously, he started the violent crash at Brands Hatch that broke both of Johnny Herbert's legs and nearly ended Herbert's career before he even got to F1. Herbert would, of course, make a recovery, although it kind of hampered him. He'd still be a 3-time Grand Prix winner and be a solid driver in his own right. Wojtek, though, broke his wrist in the crash and failed to score points for the remainder of the season. So he was still kind of an unknown coming into F1 in 1989.
Gotcha.
EuroBrun was going to be up for a challenge in 89, though, as the grid swelled to 20 teams and 39 cars. EuroBrun were the only one-car entrant for 89, as Real, Osella, BMS Scuderia Italia, and AGS expanded to 2 cars, as well as the return of Brabham and the debut of Onyx filled out the back of the grid. The ban of turbo engines was also here, which, with many involved in F1 seeing this as an opportunity to jump up the pecking order. First Grand Prix of the season in Brazil saw Wojtek in the older car make it through pre-qualifying third fastest, but was only 29th quickest, 0.7 seconds off of Philippe Alliot's Larousse. Very close to making it. Unfortunately, this would be the highlight of EuroBrun's season.
Oh no.
While the ER188B was never the slowest car in pre-qualifying, including being 6th fastest in San Marino in Mexico and 7th fastest in Phoenix, Canada and Britain, the car was just too outdated to be competitive and make the top 4 in pre-qualifying. The car was already lacking development the year before. It was running a year later, virtually unchanged, including the lack of an airbox, which seems to be a running trend here.
Big fans.
Wojtek was airbox.
Oh yeah, we are anti-airboxes here. Wojtek was giving it his best, though sometimes too much, including a violent crash in Canada, but it was to no avail. Germany saw the new car, the ER189, make its long-awaited debut. The sleek chassis was painted bright orange and now sponsored by Jägermeister, a longtime sponsor of Brun's WEC program. But the car wasn't without its teething issues, as the original roll hoop wasn't tall enough, meaning it had to be redesigned. If you look at the pictures I posted of it, the roll hoop is barely taller than the driver's head, so the next year it's much taller. So
how do you mess that? That's like
maybe they thought Wojtek was shorter.
That's the what? That's the main point of the car.
Yeah. The literal one safety features that's remained the same since the inception of Formula One, basically.
What? Anyway.
The team also only had one of the new ER189 chassis, meaning that the ER188B had to still be brought to the track every weekend. Adding to that, because EuroBrun had a chronic lack of money and inability to test, meant the new car was ridiculously underdeveloped, so the old ER188B was being rolled back up frequently on race weekends because of the new car breaking down. There's a saying in racing that if a car looks right, it will go right, but ER189 is an obvious exception to that. I think it's a really pretty race car. Definitely, in my opinion, one of the best looking cars of its era, but it was not fast. Despite the new chassis, the car still failed to make it past Friday pre-qualifying, and after the Belgian Grand Prix, Wojtek left the team. None other than Oscar Larari was drafted back into the team to replace him. However, this wouldn't be of any help, as Oscar was regularly found in the bottom half of pre-qualifying during his 5 starts for the team. The Australian Grand Prix bought another EuroBrun DNPQ at the end of the 1989 season, with EuroBrun would end the season as the only team to fail to make the grid a single time in 1989, only making it past pre-qualifying once the season opener. To no surprise, they were dead last in the Constructors' Championship. Wojtek ended the year 43rd in countback, and Larari was dead last in 47th. Euro Racing was almost entirely uninvolved throughout the year, and Jägermeister had left the team by the season-ending Australian Grand Prix, leaving the team with no starts, sponsors, or development on their new chassis.
Might be time to go home. I don't know. I think that's all she wrote.
See, at least with Coloni, they had kind of like a gradual decline, and then they hit rock bottom. Like EuroBrun was like, we're doing good, and then they hit a wall and just dropped off immediately.
They just all left.
Yeah.
Shop's empty.
Yeah.
That is exceptional. That is exceptionally bad. I love it. That is so bad. Oh. I just love seeing this fall apart like this. It's so much fun.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, I think I have commitment issues. Imagine these guys. They just walk down on that F1 team. See ya.
Oh yeah, imagine you're Walter Brunn and you get brought together with Euro Racing, and they're like, yeah, we can do this. We got this F1 thing. And then halfway through the first season, Euro Racing, whose shop is hosting the team, everything's done there and their mechanics are working on them. They're like, you don't really want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
They're like, what the...
Yeah, at that point,
we're done with this.
Yeah, that's probably, you can't, even if you tried your hardest, if you don't have a big part of the team invested in it, that's ball game.
Yeah.
The shop's just like, oh, that's the downstairs.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
That's the downstairs.
So, by the dawn of the new season, EuroBrun was officially uninvolved with the team, despite it being run out of their headquarters. They had sold all of their stock in the team to Walter Brunn. It was 100% his team now. Wright did his best job to upgrade or update the struggling chassis before his impending departure for Tyrrell, including finally building a second one. They finally had 2 ER189 chassis.
Hey.
No one's there to see it though.
Yeah. They're just kind of there.
Brunn had tested the Neotech V12 and experimental engine in the back of his Porsche sports cars, and the team planned on running the engines in the back of their F1 cars, but the deal fell through, leading them to revert to the Judd V8s they had run the year prior. Dutch engineer Kees van der Grint was brought in to replace Wright in an attempt to develop the car. But despite the lack of funds, EuroBrun expanded back to 2 cars, bringing in journeyman Roberto Moreno and Italian pay driver Claudio Langes. JSK also came back on board to sponsor the car, now painted silver and with a taller roll hoop.
Finally, about time.
I do quite like the silver cars, I must say.
It is
pretty
very
sleek.
pretty. Yeah. The season opener in Phoenix was a tale of two opposites. While Langes struggled in pre-qualifying, running nearly 2 seconds slower than the next best car and placing above only the hapless Life and Coloni, which, when we talked about it last week, that car was stuck in 1 gear instead of time that was 7 minutes long. Moreno stunned the paddock as he topped the Friday pre-qualifying timesheets, and then later proved it was no fluke by qualifying 16th.
Yeah.
To add to the surprise, Moreno made the finish in 13th, 5 laps down. Both cars then failed to pre-qualify the next week in Brazil before Moreno snuck through pre-qualifying 4th and then made the grid in 24th. However, he wouldn't even complete a lap as he suffered a jammed throttle on the first lap. Moreno made it through pre-qualifying again in 4th, but was slowest in qualifying, over a second off of 26th. Moreno then starred again in Canada, topping pre-qualifying, but missed out on the final qualifying spot by just 0.059 seconds.
That's a herder.
That's tough.
Yeah. In Mexico, he made it through pre-qualifying once more and set a time good enough for 21st. However, in Q2, he was disqualified for a push start and had to watch as his time that would have put him 25th on the grid was disallowed.
Oof.
Yeah. You may have noticed that I've failed to even mention EuroBrun's second driver, Claudio Lenges, for most of this, and that's because he would go on to fail to pre-qualify for every single one of his attempts in 1990. The team was reportedly super frustrated with his lack of performance, and he wasn't being given the most attention. In Canada, the team only gave him a handful of laps before parking him to avoid being fined, and were looking for replacement drivers. Langes allegedly found more money for the team and was given more seat time later, but his performance wouldn't improve. After the Mexico qualifying debacle, EuroBrun would fail to pre-qualify for every remaining race they showed up to. After 14 rounds, Brun reassigned all of his remaining employees at Brun Technics to focus on the sports car program, and Walter told his drivers they wouldn't be making the trip for the final 2 flyaway rounds in Japan and Australia. And that was the end of EuroBrun. Just
Jeez.
About as quickly as they showed up, they were gone.
They had like a microcosm of performance for a little bit with Moreno.
Yeah.
And then-
Roberto Moreno was a solid driver.
And then just didn't. And then they were like, yeah, we're gonna just end it. We're just gonna do it now. They should have done it a year prior, to be honest.
Yeah. It's just the problem is that they just never had the money to develop the car. Like, there was clearly a little bit of potential in it, but they just never had any money for it, especially with Euro Racing pulling the plug on their effort as well.
Still pretty fascinating that even at that time, not that I should be too surprised, but it's like just like a half season of not developing that car and making it better made all that difference. Like, you know, you think about it, I mean, how much can you really change? Well, clearly a lot, because they you know, struggled so much afterwards, but it's pretty impressive just how the field was able to, you know, ultimately pass them. And I mean, it still goes back to the fact that I can't believe these guys were still, up until that end there, flying around the world, going to these races, shipping the cars, the teams, hospitality, you know, everything like that. I mean, hosting them at hotels, like, that's still insane, but, you know, all that effort for nothing, that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the they only made 2, I think, races in their final 2 years in F1 after having like a pretty promising start to their team's existence. So EuroBrun finished its last season 17th out of 19 teams, ahead of only Coloni and Life, who both failed to make the grid a single time. Langes ended up 38th out of 40 drivers, and his record of 14 DNPQs without ever making the grid is a record that will more than likely stand forever.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, that's most. I don't see any way that's ever going to be toppled. So, congratulations to you, Mr. Langes.
Yeah,
Mr.
Enrico
Langes.
Battaglia, who we covered previously on this show, is second with 13. So he also never made the grid. Roberto Moreno, however, would finish an equal 10th with Ivan Capelli in points, because leading up to the Japanese Grand Prix, defending winner of that race, Alessandro Nannini, was involved in a helicopter accident that severed his right forearm. While he would have reconstructive surgery and recover partial usage of his arm, it would end his F1 career. Benetton then called up Moreno to replace him for the final 2 Grand Prix, and Moreno would score his best ever finish in a lengthy career with a second in Japan.
That's gnarly. That's
pretty awesome. Good for him.
That's so sick.
So yeah, that was the very brief end of EuroBrun.
There was no slow decline. Like Coloni, we got to watch it kind of unfold before our eyes. This just kind of, you blink and you miss it. That team's gone.
Yeah, kind of like lighting a match, you know, shoom, it's on, and then done.
As for where some of the guys ended up afterwards, after his relief appearance, Moreno would then run the first 11 races of 1991 for Benetton. So he scored 2 fourths and a fifth, and then he would close out the year for Jordan and Minardi. and then finished his F1 career driving for Andrea Moda in 92 and then Forti in 1995. Little is known of Claudio Lange's post-F1 career other than he apparently ran touring cars in Italy. Stefano Modena would, after his season with EuroBrun, he'd go to Brabham and even score a podium in Monaco. And then in 91 with Tyrrell, he scored another podium in Canada before running his final season with Jordan in 1992. Stefano Modena was a pretty solid driver. He'd go on to be a talented DTM driver as well. Brun and Larari would return to sports car racing the following year, but changing engine regulations meant that Brun couldn't rely on his trusty Porsche 962Cs anymore, and they were forced to build their own chassis. The Brun C91 appeared in 3 races towards the end of 91, driven by Larari, Foytek, and Jesus Pereira. The car failed to finish a single time and was retired at year's end. Foytek would go on to drive for Onyx, and I believe that would be the end of his career after that. But we will definitely cover that team in a future episode, so you'll get some closure on all of you Gregor Foytek fans out there.
I already like him.
Yeah.
He's got really funny hair too if you look him up. It's some pretty cool hair. I'll have to post that. The financial strain of the failed F1 team, as well as his own failed sports car, caused Walter Brun to dissolve his team in 1992. He continued to race as a driver, as well as helping the RWS Motorsport and Conrad Motorsports teams with their own prototypes. And finally, Gianpaolo Pavanello, the founder of Euro Racing, retired from team ownership after the EuroBrun debacle, and he turned Euro Racing into a parts firm in Italy, and he passed away in 2015 at the age of 81.
Rest in peace.
Yeah,
Probably made a lot more money selling those parts than
yeah.
team. So hey,
yeah, it's a lot cheaper than
for what
running
it's
a race
worth,
team.
you know.
I would die to see some of these teams that we're going to talk about and the teams that we have talked about. I'd love to see their checkbooks. I'd love to see
for sure.
just how dire they were. Oh my god.
It's fascinating. I don't think, and I obviously I love the business of racing and the finances and just how they were able to do it. Eludes me a little bit. There's so much extra cost to just then, making a car, putting it on the racetrack. There's just so much else, and the fact that despite being how bad they were and the lack of funding, the fact that they were still able to get there at least is really fascinating. I guess if you're not qualifying, you can save some money on hotels for a night or two more if you're leaving on Friday, but still, it's really impressive, and I would love to see more information about that, because Lord knows, that'd be a very interesting dive.
It also helps that most of the schedule was in Europe at the time, so you could drive most places, but you still had the flyaway rounds to the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, and then Brazil, and then you had to go all the way to Japan and Australia to end the season.
Yeah, that's so crazy to me.
Yep.
But yeah, I really would like to see it's my dream that this little show becomes popular enough to where I can feasibly ask for this information. Some defunct F1 team. I would just love to deep dive it. I just love to see what the expenditures were, how bad they were, because I'm sure they were bad. I'm sure they were bad. Spending all that money when they had none to go around, they have no sponsorship. What is happening? What are they getting?
Yeah.
Where is it coming from? It's really intriguing to me for all of these cases. Anyway.
So, that was the story of EuroBrun. A little bit shorter than Coloni's, as none of the parties really involved had really long careers before or after F1, and they were kind of just here and gone in the blink of an eye. But next time when we do the show, it'll be a team that was even shorter lived, but probably even a more fascinating story, as we will be covering the failed Life F1 team, and then the failed first team, and then the team that bought that chassis and tried to make their own experimental engine and use that as test bed. Life F1.
I love it.
So I'm sure that'll be a great story when we get to cover that next time.
I love all of it. Oh my gosh.
Any closing thoughts, you guys?
Happy for Oscar getting his F1 drive.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it sucks that it didn't go better, but it's he made it.
Yeah.
His dream was to get to F1, and even if it didn't go well and he didn't get to appear on the grid most times, he got there.
Yeah.
You can always say that he was an F1 driver. So.
I want to give a shout out to Mr. Claudio Langes. Langes?
I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
So.
All those Italian names, man, you never know.
Yeah.
But Mr. Claudio, you are a hero amongst men. You are
record holder.
Quite possibly the slowest F1 driver. One of. There's definitely worse.
He's up there.
He's definitely up there. I'm so impressed by the fact that his performance was so bad that in a show designed to talk about Formula One failures, he was just a little tick mark on it. He was that bad. He was so bad that he was a little tick mark on what the whole point of the show, and I love that. I think that's my favorite part of it, honestly.
Before we go, I also want to give a shout out to our friend Michael at im2_designs41. He made a pretty cool Cologne F1 phone wallpaper, and he's going to be doing those for most of the episodes we do. So go check him out. He makes really good stuff. He loves making race car wallpapers.
Go find that Cologne one because it's the coolest racing logo I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. I'll have that linked below. Yeah. And that was this has been Disqualified. For Davey and Tommy, I'm Matthew, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.